At my father's 70th birthday party, my mother handed me a glass of red wine and said, "For old time's sake." I took a sip, smiled, and waited for the burning in my throat. It wasn't the alcohol. It was the memory of being told I was a burden, of signing papers I didn't understand, of watching my brother walk free while I paid the price. They thought I came back to forgive. What they didn't know was I came back with a badge, a file, and a plan. This time, I wasn't the one on trial. The Mitchell house hadn't changed. Same marble floors, same stiff-back chairs, same chandelier that glittered like it had secrets to hide. I hadn't walked through that front door in 7 years. Not since they handed me the keys to an old Buick and told me to make something of myself while Derek got a new condo and a job at Dad's firm. The party was already loud. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses, all of it too bright, too rehearsed. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. No one noticed me at first, or maybe they pretended not to, until my mother spotted me. "Avery?" she said, her lips stiffening before curving into something that passed for a smile. "You came." I nodded. "You invited me." She laughed, short and dry. "It was your father's idea." My father, the man of the hour, stood across the room in a navy blazer that probably cost more than my annual rent. His arm draped over Derek's shoulder. They were laughing, toasting. Family, the kind that didn't include me. My mother handed me a glass of wine. "Let's not make this awkward, for old time's sake." I took it. The glass was warm in my hand, the scent familiar. I took a slow sip, letting the bitter red coat my tongue. My throat tightened. Not from poison, from memory. The last time she offered me anything was a contract. Immunity for Derek, silence from me. I smiled. Tastes the same. She tilted her head. "Meaning?" "Like betrayal." For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that cold poise she always wore when cameras or guests were nearby. She leaned in. "Don't ruin this, Avery. You've caused enough damage." "Funny," I said, setting the glass down. I was about to say the same. Then I turned, walking deeper into the party. Not a guest, not family, but a storm they didn't see coming. Every smile I passed felt paper thin. A couple of my cousins nodded awkwardly. One aunt pretended she didn't see me. And Derek, oh Derek. His face froze when our eyes met. He recovered quickly, clinking glasses with some executive, probably another accomplice in one of his schemes. I didn't approach him. Not yet. Instead, I walked toward the photo wall. It was new. Professionally printed snapshots mounted on thick boards. Derek in graduation robes, Derek cutting the ribbon at Dad's new office, Derek holding his firstborn. Not a single photo of me, not one. I wasn't surprised. I hadn't existed in their story for years. A waitress passed with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. I took one without tasting it, just to keep my hands busy. My other hand slipped into my clutch, feeling for the tiny recorder nestled inside. Still running. Still catching every word since I arrived. I made my way to the study. A quiet room at the edge of the house where no one lingered long. It was where they sat me down years ago with a pen and a lie. "Just sign this, Avery," my mother had said. "It's to protect the family." What she meant was, protect Derek. Let him walk clean from the mess he made while I took the stain. Tonight that room was empty. Perfect. I sat on the leather couch and pulled out my phone. There were already 2 missed calls from Erin. I texted back, everything recording. Give me 20 minutes. Behind me, the door creaked. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Derek. "You're really here," he said. "Didn't think you had it in you." I turned slowly. "You thought wrong." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Look, I know things got messy, but this is Dad's birthday. Can we just not talk about how you're trying to pin a federal crime on me? Again?" He blinked. then smiled that smirk I used to fall for. "It's not personal, Avery, just logistics." I stood. "Well, logistics are about to get complicated." And with that, I walked past him, brushing his shoulder, leaving him alone in the same room where he once erased my future. The hallway back to the main room felt longer than I remembered. The air buzzed with low conversations and overpriced cologne. I could feel Derek's eyes on my back as I walked away, just like he used to follow me as a kid. Always watching, always calculating. I needed air, not because I was overwhelmed, but because the next step required clarity. Outside, the night was cooler than expected. I stepped onto the balcony, slipping my phone into my jacket, tapping the side twice. Recording paused. I needed a moment off the record. From here I could see the whole backyard, fairy lights strung like spider webs, waiters weaving through crowds, laughter drifting up like smoke. A beautiful lie, all of it. "Didn't expect to see you here," said a voice behind me. It was Harper, Dad's assistant, younger than me, sharp, always carrying too many files and too much loyalty to a man who didn't deserve it. I kept my eyes forward. Figured I'd come ruin the family photo. She stepped beside me, lowering her voice. "I heard what they're planning, the trust, the shell companies. Your name's all over the clean-up paperwork." I nodded. "I know." "You okay?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I'm ready." She hesitated, then handed me a small envelope. "From someone who thinks you shouldn't fight this alone." I opened it after she left. Inside was a business card, plain white, no logo, just a name, Dalton R. Sykes, Federal Oversight Division, and a time, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Come alone. I let out a slow breath. They thought they were ambushing me. But this time, I had allies, I had leverage, I had truth. I walked back into the party and scanned the room. My father laughed with a senator. My mother whispered to a lawyer. Derek flirted with someone's wife. They still thought I was the same girl who signed the papers and disappeared. What they didn't know was that I had never truly left. I had just learnt to watch and wait. This time, they wouldn't see it coming. It started with a bus stop. I was 7, standing in the cold with a bright red backpack and shoes a size too big. All the other kids had been picked up already. Hugs, car doors slamming, engines fading into distance. But I stood there, fingers stiff with cold, waiting. The sun had nearly set when the janitor found me. "Still here, kid?" he asked, surprised. "My mum's coming," I said. "She's just late." She never came. Dad finally showed up an hour later, reeking of bourbon and impatience. "Why didn't you call someone?" he snapped. "I was busy." That was the first time I realised I came last, not just in emergencies, but always. I stopped asking to be picked up after that. Then came the birthdays. Mine were low-key, intimate, not a big deal this year. Derek's were themed extravaganzas with ponies, bounce houses and photographers. The one time I asked for something more, just a cake with my name on it, my mother sighed and said, "Avery, not everything has to be about you." And so it never was. At 12, I broke my arm falling off a tree in the backyard. I screamed until my throat went raw. Derek ran to get help. My mother looked at me and said, "You shouldn't have been climbing." No hug, no concern, just judgment. I started building invisible walls after that, one cold brick at a time. I stopped bringing home drawings from school, stopped trying to join the dinner conversations. I became background noise in my own house. At 16, I overheard my father tell a client, "We've got one solid kid and one, well, she's a bit of a wild card." He meant me. I remember staring at my reflection that night, wondering how someone could feel so present and so invisible at the same time. But the worst part wasn't the neglect, it was the pretending, the way we all smiled in Christmas photos, like the tension wasn't thick enough to choke on. The way they told me I was loved, but never showed it in ways that mattered. I learned early, words were cheap, promises were currency I could never cash. And love? Love came with conditions I never managed to meet. I was 19 when I thought for the first and only time that maybe they did love me. Derek had been in a car accident. Not serious, but bloody enough to make headlines. I was away at college then, barely scraping by with 2 jobs and a half scholarship. Still, when I heard, I took the earliest bus back home. The hospital room was too bright. My mother sat by Derek's bed, brushing his hair back like he was a child again. My father paced, barking into a phone about insurance and liability. When I stepped in, no one looked up. I cleared my throat. I came as soon as I heard. My mother turned. Her eyes were red. "We didn't call you." "I know, I just wanted to be here." Something shifted in her expression, almost soft, almost. "We could use a favour," she said. Derek had lost a lot of blood. They needed a donor. Same blood type. I was the only match. Of course I said yes. They didn't even ask how I got there. They just signed the forms, then left me alone with a nurse and a needle in my arm. Afterward, I sat in the waiting area, dizzy and pale. My mother passed by on her way to get coffee. She didn't stop, didn't say thank you. It was the nurse who brought me a blanket. Later that night, Derek woke up. I was sitting nearby, head resting against the window. He looked at me, groggy, and said, "Oh, you're here." That was it. No gratitude, no recognition that I'd given a part of myself to save him. The next morning, there was a photo in the local newspaper, so family rallies around son after crash. It showed my parents beside Derek, holding his hands. I wasn't in the frame. I wasn't even mentioned. I kept that paper for years, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder, a warning. Hope was a dangerous thing in a family like mine. Every time I reached for it, they let it slice me open. That day, I stopped reaching. It happened on a Tuesday. I was 25, home for what I thought was a rare attempt at reconciliation. My parents had invited me back under the pretense of sorting out old misunderstandings. The house was quiet when I arrived, too quiet. We sat in the study, the same leather chairs, the same stale scent of power and polish. "We need your help," my father said, folding his hands. I should have known then. Mitchells didn't ask, they demanded. "There's been an issue," he continued, "some discrepancies in the firm's financials. A junior associate made a few mistakes. It's under review." I looked at Derek, seated beside him. He couldn't meet my eyes. My mother placed a folder in front of me. "These papers will protect the company. We just need you to sign. It's mostly formality. You're listed as an advisor, remember?" I wasn't. Not really. Still, I opened the folder. Legal jargon, pages of statements, dates that didn't match anything I'd ever done. I flipped through them slowly, heart pounding. "You want me to take the fall," I said. Silence. My father cleared his throat. "It would never go that far. We'd get it cleared up quietly. You'd be compensated, of course. We'll set up a fund. A house, maybe." I laughed, actually laughed. "You want to buy my silence, again." "Avery," my mother said, voice tight, "you're not thinking clearly. This is for the family, for Derek's future. He has a wife now, a child." "And I have what?" I asked. No one answered. That was the moment. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation. It was the silence. They didn't see me as a daughter. I wasn't family. I was leverage, a tool, a pawn they could sacrifice for the golden sun. I stood up, folder in hand. "You think I'm going to just disappear again? You think you can break me the same way twice?" Derek finally spoke. "You said you'd always protect us." "I did," I whispered, "but not anymore." I left the house with my name on documents I never intended to sign and a decision I wouldn't reverse. That was the day I buried the daughter they never wanted. The email came in with a subject line that read, "Family Opportunity." I nearly deleted it without reading, but something made me pause. It was from my mother. "Dear Avery," it began, "we would like to invite you to an important hearing regarding the family trust and its future structure. Your presence would mean a great deal to us." And it was signed, "With love, Mum." I stared at it for a long time, then opened the attachment. Legal documents, trust transfers, reallocations. But tucked between vague terms and estate jargon was something familiar. My name. I wasn't listed as a beneficiary. I was listed as a designated consultant for administrative transition, which meant the fall girl. Again. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Erin. "They're setting up a trap," she said after reading through the documents. "This time it's white collar. They want to make it look like you handled the accounts. They go free, you get the heat." I already knew that. I just needed someone else to say it. "They think I'm still the same girl who signed without reading," I said. Erin's voice was careful. "You're not." "No," I replied. "I'm something else now." A week later, I received an official subpoena. Not from them, but from the government. I was being called as a witness in the Mitchell Family Trust investigation. No more pretense. They weren't asking me to play along this time. They were cornering me. But what they didn't know was I had been preparing for this for years. Every document I'd ever signed, every conversation I'd ever recorded, every interaction since that Tuesday, I'd kept it all. Not for revenge, for survival. I was done being their scapegoat. This wasn't a negotiation. It was the beginning of exposure. And this time, I had no intention of disappearing quietly. The courthouse smelled like old paper and colder truths. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in grey, neutral, unreadable. Erin was already inside, sorting through a folder thicker than my trust in bloodlines. "You ready?" she asked, eyes sharp. "I've been ready for years," I said. Outside the hearing room, I saw them, my parents, Derek, and their lawyer, a smug man in a $1,000 suit. They looked up when I walked in. My mother's eyes narrowed, scanning my outfit, like she could control the outcome with disapproval alone. Derek had the nerve to smile. "Glad you came." "Would have hated to miss the reunion," I said. Inside, the hearing began with pleasantries. The estate manager explaining restructuring needs, how each family member's role would be clarified moving forward. That was the word they kept using, clarified. Translation: isolate, Avery, absolve the others. Then it was my turn. They asked about my involvement in the family trust, my responsibilities, access to records, signatures. I answered calmly. I haven't held any active role in the trust since I was 25. The opposing counsel slid forward a printed email. My email. It had been doctored, words added, timelines shifted. It looked like I had volunteered to oversee distributions. It looked like I'd agreed. I didn't flinch. Erin rose. "We contest the authenticity of this exhibit. My client has digital archives and third-party verification that contradict this version." They didn't expect that, especially not from me. My father looked away. My mother's lips tightened. Derek shifted in his seat. But I saw it then. Not guilt, not fear, just calculation. The wheels still turning, still looking for an exit plan that didn't involve accountability. They weren't scared of truth. They were scared of losing control. And that's when I realized something else. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. This was federal. And I had a choice to make. Let them spin their version or burn the whole narrative down. I took a breath and made my decision. That night, I didn't go home. I went to a diner off Route 9. The kind with sticky menus and a waitress who calls everyone on. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere the walls didn't echo with betrayal. I sat at a booth by the window, coffee cooling in my hands. My phone buzzed once, then again. Text from Derek. "We can still fix this. Don't go too far, Ave. This won't end well for you." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out a flash drive from my coat pocket, matte black, unmarked. I'd made the backup 2 years ago, before I ever returned to this town, just in case the past came calling. I opened my laptop and reviewed the files, scanned documents with metadata, unedited audio recordings, timestamps, everything they thought I'd forgotten or buried. And then there was one file I hadn't opened in years, a video clip. I hesitated, then clicked play. It was Derek, at 23, sitting across from me in that same study room. His hands fidgeted, eyes darting. He was scared. "I just need you to sign this," he'd said. "I messed up, Avery. If this gets out, I'm done. Please." And I had signed. Because I believed back then that protecting him meant protecting us all. Now I saw the truth. He never once looked at me as a sister, just a shield. I uploaded the video to a private drive, encrypted it, and sent the link to Erin. Subject: contingency plan. I closed the laptop and drained the rest of my coffee. The diner lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty, just my rental car and a couple of pickups. Tomorrow, the Mitchells would go back to court, polished and poised. But this time I'd bring the storm with me, and when it hit, it wouldn't just shake the room. It would rewrite every name on the family tree. I met Special Agent Dalton in a parking garage beneath a federal building. Not in an office, not at a cafe, a parking garage. It told me everything I needed to know. He was still playing careful. He stood by a concrete pillar, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning every movement around us. Time had aged him, lines deeper, hair greyer, but his presence hadn't softened one bit. "You came," he said. "You called." Dalton gave a half smile, almost regretful. "Didn't think I'd see you again, Mitchell. I didn't think I'd need to see you again." He nodded, then reached into his coat and handed me a manila envelope. "Your family's name popped up on our radar again. I figured it might be time." I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were transaction logs, internal memos, and a photo I hadn't expected. Derek, shaking hands with someone I recognized from an old case, a man we once flagged for laundering through Shell real estate purchases in Arizona. "You think they're involved now?" I asked. Dalton shrugged. "I think they never stopped. They just got smarter about hiding it." I let out a bitter laugh. "You told me back then to stay out of it. I told you to survive. You did." He leaned in slightly. "But now they've dragged you back in, and I can't ignore what you are anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Leverage." I hated that word. It was the same word my father used when offering me up as a solution. But this time it was different, because I had power too. Dalton gave me a choice: work with him under the table, unofficial, undocumented, or step aside and let the system grind my family down on its own slow, ruthless timeline. I didn't hesitate. "I'll help," I said, "but not to protect myself." Dalton tilted his head. "Then who?" I zipped the envelope shut. "Someone they haven't broken yet." I turned to leave, heels echoing off the concrete, my mind already writing the first page of their unravelling. They taught me how to be invisible. Now, I'd teach them what happened when a ghost came back to haunt. Back in my apartment, I opened the old lockbox beneath the floorboard, the one I hadn't touched since walking away from that other life. Inside, a burner phone, 2 USB drives, a faded ID badge stamped with a red seal, Department of Justice, Strategic Intelligence Analyst, and a photograph of a team I hadn't seen in years, smiles tight, eyes tired. People who had lived too long behind lies. I held the badge in my hand longer than I expected. It didn't feel like mine anymore. But it was. 10 years ago, I took a leave of absence from my government role under a classified protection clause. Emotional conflict with civilian ties, the file said. It meant my family was too dirty to risk exposure. But I wasn't pulled out because I was weak. I was pulled out because I knew too much. They thought I'd vanish quietly. Instead, I watched from the sidelines. I worked under aliases, assisted federal contractors, helped decode laundering routes through Nevada and Florida. When I wasn't running numbers, I was building cases for others brave enough to put their names on them. I didn't speak, I didn't sign, but I remembered everything. And now, as I pulled up encrypted folders on my secure laptop, I began matching the data Dalton had given me to the old threads I never cut loose. 3 shell companies tied to Derek. One used to own a ghost property in Arizona, registered under a name I'd traced before in a human trafficking case. Another funneled money through offshore accounts. The third, it listed my name as independent auditor. Sloppy, desperate, predictable. They used my identity again, assuming I'd stay buried. What they didn't realize was the Avery they silenced had evolved. I copied every relevant file into a clean drive. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Erin," I said when she picked up, "I need you to register me as an independent consultant with federal immunity privileges. File it under the Strategic Analyst Exemption Clause, Code 41E. She didn't speak for a moment. Then simply, "You're back in?" I looked at the wall where I used to pin case files like constellations. "No," I said, "I'm finishing what they started." The press conference was scheduled for Thursday morning at the state capitol, a bland marble building that reeked of power and procedure. Dalton had warned me, "We don't need your name public. We can keep you behind the scenes." But I shook my head. No more shadows. I wasn't doing this for spectacle. I was doing it because my silence had once protected them. This time it would break them. I walked into the hall with Erin on one side and a federal attorney on the other. Flashes went off. Reporters craned their necks. They weren't expecting me, just another bureaucratic update on white-collar crime. But when I stepped behind the podium and cleared my throat, the room hushed. "My name is Avery Mitchell," I said, steady and low. "I am a former strategic analyst with the Department of Justice. I've come forward to provide testimony and evidence in an ongoing investigation into the Mitchell Family Trust and its associated business entities." No one moved. No one breathed. I saw my father's lawyer in the back row, his face drained like someone had yanked the ground from under him. I continued. "For over a decade, I gathered information related to financial mismanagement, identity fraud, and asset laundering tied to my family's private holdings. These actions implicate several members, including Derek Mitchell, in federal-level violations." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I wasn't finished. "In addition, I am filing for legal reassignment of protection for a minor involved, a child whose identity has been jeopardized due to ongoing criminal exposure. That request has been approved effective immediately." That part wasn't just business, it was personal, because that child, Derek's son from an affair he buried, was the only one in this mess who still had a chance at becoming something different. I stepped away from the mic, hands calm, eyes forward. The room erupted in questions, cameras flashing again, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had already spoken louder than they ever expected, and this time the whole world was listening. The courtroom was colder than I remembered, not in temperature but in tone. Everything echoed, footsteps, whispers, the soft clink of binders opening. It was sterile, strategic, exactly how the Mitchells liked things. My parents sat to the left, Derek beside them. All 3 dressed like grief had been tailored to fit. Black, polished, rehearsed. Their lawyer conferred with the estate judge, smiling with the ease of someone used to bending rules, not breaking them. Then they saw me. I wasn't seated in the gallery, I wasn't behind the defense table. I walked in from the hallway behind the court bench, with Dalton and the federal oversight team. Whispers flew like sparks. The judge raised a brow. We were not informed of federal presence in this hearing. Dalton stood. We apologise for the abruptness, Your Honour, but given new evidence presented by Ms. Mitchell, we've been granted special motion to intercede. The judge looked at me. Ms. Mitchell, are you appearing as a defendant, plaintiff, or witness? I stepped forward, voice firm. As a federal consultant and government witness, Your Honour. Gasps, audible ones. Derek's smirk vanished. My father's fingers clenched the bench rail. Only my mother didn't move. Her stillness was more telling than shock. I opened my file, setting it neatly on the table. I have documentation of forged transactions, fabricated advisory roles, and identity fraud, all perpetrated using my name under the authority of this family's internal structures. The judge nodded slowly. This is now a criminal investigation. The lawyer for the estate stood, rattled. Your Honour, this is absurd. She's emotionally compromised. This is a vendetta dressed as a legal process. I didn't blink. I pulled out a recording, played it. My father's voice. Just pin it on Avery. She won't fight it. She never has. And then Derek. She owes us. She wouldn't even be here if it weren't for us. Silence. No one looked at me because they knew this time I wasn't here for them. I was here for the truth, and the truth had teeth. The judge called for a recess, but it wasn't silence that filled the room. It was thunder under marble. Reporters scrambled for the exits, phones buzzing like hornets. Erin leaned toward me, her voice low. You just set fire to the floor. I'm not done yet, I said. Dalton nodded slightly. They're reeling. Now we hit them with the asset trail. We returned to our table as the judge re-entered. The gavel struck wood. Proceed, she said. I pulled up a second file, connecting Derek's shell companies to 3 offshore accounts. These were routed through a defunct non-profit, I explained, but the signatures authorising those transfers were taken from my old employment documents, forged, then digitised. The judge reviewed them. How did you obtain these? I compiled them during my time with the Department of Justice, I replied. They were flagged in unrelated federal audits but never followed through due to internal conflicts of interest. I turned then directly to the courtroom. But I also have personal motive, I said. Not revenge, not redemption, protection. The projector lit up with a scanned birth certificate. Name, Isaac Mitchell. Mother, unknown. Father, Derek Mitchell, legal guardian, pending reassignment, due to exposure to criminal enterprise. Gasps again. My mother blinked. Derek stood. You can't do this. I already did, I said. He's not your cover story anymore. He's a child, one you tried to erase. The judge tapped her gavel again. Mr. Mitchell, sit down. I faced the bench. I request immediate injunction against the Mitchell estate regarding all custodial and financial influence over Isaac. I further request provisional guardianship until federal investigation is complete. The judge stared at me, measured, then nodded. Granted. Derek slumped back. I didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. This was survival. For a boy who still had a chance at something better than this legacy of lies. The courthouse steps were a wall of flashing lights and shouted questions. I emerged with Isaac beside me, small hand gripping mine tightly. He didn't speak, just watched. Wide-eyed, alert, like a child who'd learned too young that silence was armour. Dalton shielded us from most of the reporters, but a few broke through. Ms. Mitchell, are the charges against your family criminal or civil? Are you planning to testify in Washington next? Is the child with you your son? That one stopped me cold. I turned to the reporter, a woman maybe 5 years younger than me, notebook trembling in her hand. No, I said, he's not my son. I looked down at Isaac. His eyes were so much like Derek's it hurt, but there was softness too, something Derek never had. He's someone I won't let them destroy. We got into the waiting SUV. The doors shut out the noise, but not the weight. Dalton passed me an envelope. What's this? I asked. Formal clearance. You're now officially reinstated as a protected consultant. Immunity's locked in. I tucked the envelope away without opening it. Erin turned from the front seat. You sure about this? Once it goes to federal court, it's not just them on trial, your entire family name. Let it burn, I said. She didn't argue. That night, I took Isaac to a safe house tucked along a quiet river road. It had a view of trees, a porch swing, and a lock on every door. He didn't ask for toys or screens, just a glass of milk and a blanket. Is this home? He asked. I sat beside him, unsure how to answer. It's somewhere new, I said. That's a good start. Later, when he slept, I walked out onto the porch. Stars above, crickets in the dark, and silence. Not the tense kind I grew up with, but the kind that lets you exhale. They tried to use me again. They thought I'd come back weaker, but they forgot something. I wasn't the lost daughter anymore. I was the woman who returned with fire, and I wasn't finished yet. A week later, the knock came at the safe house. 3 taps, hesitant, almost polite. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach twist. It was my mother. She stood there in a dark coat, eyes tired, lips pressed together like she'd rehearsed this moment, but still didn't know how to start it. I opened the door halfway, keeping the chain on. What do you want? I asked. Her voice cracked. Just to talk. I hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Not for her, for me. I needed to hear whatever script she'd prepared. I needed to see if, after everything, there was anything real behind those eyes. She stepped in, taking in the plain walls and the soft hum of cartoons from the back room. You took him, she said, not accusing, just surprised. No, I said. I saved him. She nodded, then sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap like a child waiting to be scolded. We made mistakes, she began. I didn't sit. We? I asked. Or just you and Dad watching Derek crash through lives and pretending it was rain? Her lip trembled. You don't understand how hard it was. Keeping the family together. Together? I snapped. You mean keeping the image together? I wasn't part of that. She blinked. We didn't know how to love you right. That's the first honest thing you've ever said to me. Silence stretched. She looked toward the hallway, where Isaac's shadow flickered across the floor. He looks like Derek. I didn't respond. Then she added, softer, but he looks at you the way you used to look at me, before you stopped trying. I swallowed hard. That's why I won't let you near him. She looked up sharply. Because I know what happens to kids who keep trying to be loved by someone who doesn't know how. Her shoulders sagged. She stood, eyes glassy now. Goodbye, Avery. I nodded, and this time I didn't watch her go, because I wasn't hoping she'd turn back, because I didn't need her to. 2 days after my mother left, it was my father who came. No warning, no assistant, just him and a beige trench coat that reeked of power long past its expiration date. I met him outside on the edge of the gravel driveway. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and his fell far too close to mine. You've made quite the mess, he said. No greeting. Just accusation. I folded my arms, not as big as the one you built. He studied me. No warmth, just calculation. You think this makes you righteous, burning your own family down? I didn't burn anything, I said. I just lit the match. You built the pyre. He took a step closer. Do you have any idea what you've cost us? The firm, the estate? You mean Derek? He didn't respond. I laughed bitterly. You still can't say it. You still can't admit it was always about him. Because he was the future, my father snapped. You were always too stubborn, too unpredictable. No, I said quietly. I was inconvenient. I asked questions. I noticed things. He glanced at the house. And now you've got his mistake under your roof. My jaw tightened. He's not a mistake. He's a boy. And unlike you, I don't abandon people when they become inconvenient. A long silence stretched between us. He sighed, running a hand through his greying hair. You could come back, you know. It's not too late. The press will move on. We'll clean it up. I stared at him, disbelief catching in my throat. You still think this is about saving face? He didn't answer. I stepped back. You need to leave. Don't come here again. Avery, no. You don't get to say my name like it means something to you. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked away without another word. As he disappeared down the drive, I felt nothing. No regret, no doubt, just clarity. This time I had chosen the door they always slammed in my face, and I'd locked it behind them. Isaac found me on the porch after my father left. He didn't say anything, just crawled onto the wooden swing beside me and sat quietly, legs too short to touch the floor. For a while we rocked in silence, the creak of the chains the only sound between us. Then, softly, he asked, "Was that your dad?" I nodded. "Is he like my dad?" The question made something twist in my chest. I turned to him. He used to be, but I'm not like I used to be. He thought about that for a second. "Is that why you left your family?" I hesitated. Then, "No, I didn't leave them. I just stopped letting them hurt me." He nodded again, solemn, like someone far older than his years. "I saw my mum once," he said suddenly. "She was crying in a parking lot." I blinked. "When?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Before I came to stay with Derek. She looked at me but didn't come closer. I think she wanted to." That twist inside me pulled tighter. "Do you remember what she looked like?" He nodded. "Like you, but sadder." I wrapped an arm around his shoulder. He leaned in, and for a moment the past felt quiet. Maybe his mother had tried, maybe she hadn't. But I'd tried once too, and I remembered what it felt like to reach for someone and find only air. Not for him, not anymore. Inside the house, the phone buzzed. Erin's name lit up the screen. I answered. "The court approved everything," she said. "Permanent guardianship, immunity. The Mitchell Trust is frozen pending investigation. You won." I didn't smile, because this wasn't about winning. It was about ending, about stopping the cycle before it reached Isaac. As I hung up, I looked down at him. "Want pancakes for dinner?" He grinned. "With whipped cream?" I ruffled his hair. "Only way they count." And just like that, something began to soften. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to feel like the start of something we could both believe in. A year later, no one asked about the Mitchells anymore. Their names faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals, fresher faces. The estate was tied up in litigation. Derek took a plea deal and disappeared to some minimum security facility with white walls and no windows. My parents retreated to their second home in Maine, where no one knew them and no one asked questions. But I didn't think about them often. Not anymore. I had other things to do, like help Isaac with his book reports, teach him how to ride a bike down the dusty roads behind the bookstore I now owned, drink coffee before the sun rose and listen to the stillness without waiting for something to break it. The store was small, just one level, wood shelves, a bell that jingled whenever someone walked in. I called it the second page, because that's what we were, not a sequel, a new story. I spent the mornings sorting books, the afternoons reading aloud to Isaac, and the evenings writing. At first it was just notes, then chapters, then a full manuscript. The title came easily, How to Walk Away from the Family That Broke You. Not a guide, not a revenge piece, just a map. For the girl I used to be, for the kids like Isaac, for anyone who needed permission to stop bleeding, for people who never bothered to notice. I didn't expect anyone to publish it. But one day, an editor walked into the shop, picked up a sample copy I'd printed for the local shelf, and asked, "Is this yours?" I nodded. She said, "It's going to help someone." And for once I believed it. Because sometimes survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet mornings, full mugs, a child's laughter echoing through shelves. Sometimes it's being forgotten by the world and finally remembering yourself. And sometimes It's starting over with whipped cream on pancakes.